Shalom and welcome to Jewels of Judaism. In this video, I will explain the significance of one of the names of God, Adonai Tzevaot. This week's Torah portion is called BeMidbar, which means in the desert, and it's found in the first 4 chapters of the book of Numbers. Now, the book of Numbers deals a lot with counting and numbers. That's why it's called the book of Numbers. And we see that in the first few verses. I would like to begin reading Numbers chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Now, the Lord was speaking to Moses at this point, and the Lord said to Moses, "Take a census of all the congregation of the sons of Israel by their families, by their fathers' households, according to the number of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward, whoever is able to go out to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies." So God was commanding Moses and Aaron to count the men of Israel from 20 years old and upward. And it specifies all who are able to go out to war. In Hebrew, that's kol yotzei tzava, all who go out to war. And then it actually says as well that they are to count them, to number them by their armies. Now, the Hebrew word for army and war is the same word. It's tzava. And now tzava is significant because the plural, like armies, is tzevaot. And as we are studying this week, the name of the Lord is Adonai Tzevaot. Now, this name, Adonai Tzevaot, is literally translated as the Lord of armies. We often see it translated in English as the Lord of hosts, which hosts meaning many. But more specifically, we see the use of this word consistently in the Bible as armies, war. He is the Lord of armies. Now, we see this name of God explained in context in the book of Samuel. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, in a familiar account of the Israelites fighting the Philistines, and a young man named David comes to visit his brothers who are in the Israelite army at the time, and he volunteers to kill this Philistine who was a giant, who was blaspheming the name of God. And we see an exchange between these two, and in their conversation, David uses this name of God, Adonai Tzevaot, and he explains what it means. It says this in 1 Samuel 17, verses 44 and 45. "The Philistine also said to David, 'Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field.' Then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted.'" So in this exchange, David says, "I come to you in the name of Adonai Tzevaot, the Lord of hosts." And then he goes on to explain the God of armies. Specifically, he says the God of armies of Israel here, but it's the God of armies. And this is what God's name means, Adonai Tzevaot, the Lord of armies. David, this young man, who was thought as nothing in the sight of this giant, came in the name of Adonai Tzevaot to defeat the enemy. He knew the God whom he served. He knew that God is not just some powerful God. He is the commander-in-chief of the armies. He is the commander of commanders, and no one can defeat him. So David knew. He had such confidence because he knew Adonai Tzevaot. Now, this name of God, Adonai Tzevaot, is used about 250 times in the Bible. However, it's never used in the Torah. The first time we see it is in this book, 1 Samuel, and actually it's in the first chapter. In another familiar story, so this is the first time that the name Adonai Tzevaot is used in the Bible, is in 1 Samuel chapter 1. It's a story of Hannah, which we are all familiar with. Hannah was married to a man named Elkanah. Now, Elkanah had another wife named Peninnah. Now, it tells us that Hannah was barren, but Peninnah had children. She provided children for her husband. And it also tells us that Peninnah would mock and ridicule Hannah. And now Hannah was facing societal shame. In her home, through the second wife, she was facing continual mocking and ridicule. And she just felt worthless and she felt depressed. And we see this struggle in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And it talks about how year after year, Elkanah would take the whole family, his 2 wives and the children of Peninnah, to go to the yearly sacrifice at Shiloh, and they would eat together. But it says that Hannah would weep because she was just so bitter in her spirit. And this went on year after year. She was in a hopeless situation. But at one point, one year, it says that she went and prayed. And we have a record of her prayer, and I want to read it, because this is where we read Hannah using this name of God. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 9, "Then Hannah rose after eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She, greatly distressed, prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall never come on his head." As we read this record of Hannah's prayer, we understand her situation in deep, deep sorrow, in bitterness of soul, knowing nowhere else to turn. She did not have anywhere else to go. She came and prayed to God at the temple, at the place of worship in Shiloh. And the very first word out of her mouth was Adonai Tzevaot, the Lord of armies. She went to the commander-in-chief because she knew that he alone had the power, the ability to change the situation. No one else could. Hannah knew her God, and she knew the power of God. And despite an impossible situation, she believed that God could still help her, and he did. The Bible goes on, the record goes on to explain that God remembered her, that he granted her request. She had a son, and this son was the prophet Shmuel. And Shmuel is one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. And through her pain and through her faith, we have the great prophet Shmuel. We are reminded through this name of God, Adonai Tzevaot, that he is the Lord of all the armies. He is the commander of chief of all chiefs. There's no one more powerful than him, and that's the point. Whatever we're facing in our life, we need to remember who God is. Let's pray in the name of Adonai Tzevaot. There's not magic in that name, but we need to remember who he is, the most powerful commander in all of the universe. I've given you a brief overview of this week's commentary, and I invite you to read my full commentary on my website, jewelsofjudaism.com, under the title Adonai Tzevaot. Thank you for watching. If you've liked this video, please like it on YouTube. Feel free to share it with others, and Shabbat Shalom.